Good evening. Well, it's much louder than I'm today. Good evening, everyone. Hi. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. For those that might not know me, my name is Gary Anderson. I'm the Director of Planning and Economic Development. I've seen a lot of you this week from Monday till now. It's been a super busy week. It's been wild and crazy Planapalooza. We have our consultant partners from TPUDC that have been here all week. So thanks to all of you that have come to any of the meetings and provided input. Thanks for coming out tonight. Thanks for telling your friends. Thanks for stopping by Workspace. One thing I want to say is this is not the end of the process tonight, right? This is just kind of the end of this week. It's been an intense week, but I can't wait to hear some of the work that our consultant friends have put together on the community input and what they heard from the community. So I'm super excited. I did want to introduce Eric Krause, who's the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Eric, do you want to say something quick?
Thank you, Gary. I want to just thank everyone that's come out tonight and everyone that's been involved this week. It's been very exciting to see everyone involved in the process. I want to give a special thanks to TPUDC and all their expertise that they've provided this week. It seems like they have a dozen employees that are supporting us this week, and it's made a big difference. Thank you to all the elected officials that have come out this week and other Planning and Zoning Commission members, all the people from different committees in town that have been involved, like the Downtown Special Services District, the Housing Commission, the Sustainability Commission, the Conservation Commission, the Land Trust, the library, all those groups that just provide a great input for us, and especially the town staff that's been involved this week from the planning department, from police and fire, engineering, parks and rec, water department, manager's office, and all the business owners that have come down to provide their input to our vision, and the organizations in town have been involved too. We've really enjoyed hearing what you've loved about Manchester this week. Everyone seems to be very proud of the diversity and opportunity that Manchester provides, how much we embrace our history and the variety of housing, and commercial opportunities that we have in town, and the recreation that we provide in town. Manchester really is a complete town. And we're not a big impersonal city, and we're not a charmless bedroom community like a lot of our neighbors. People are happy to be here in Manchester. They've really chosen Manchester. And that's very reflected in the discussion from this week. And I think everybody's looking for us to take that next step. As PPUC has talked a lot about this week, we want to go from like a good place to live or to a great place to live. That's been the message that they've been saying that I think has really resonated with what people are feeling. There's a lot of excitement about the potential plans we've talked about this week. There's also been a lot of concerns that have been brought up. I think we've really heard that. Whenever you're writing a plan of conservation and development like we do every decade, you have to balance how you're going to be growing, how you're going to be growing smartly, and how you're going to take on those challenges that are going to come up that you're not really prepared for. So as Gary said, I want to focus, this is not the end of the process. This is a strong week, and please continue to stay involved. There's lots of months to go as far as public hearings and work date, and please look for people that are not involved in the process now that you think are missing, that need to be part of this discussion. Again, there's lots of opportunities that people take advantage through emails, surveys, and workshops that we've presented. So please continue to spread the word to your neighbors and people that you think should be more invested in this process. Next year, we celebrate 2 centuries of Manchester, and we've come a long way from Morphle Parish. And I just want to thank you all for helping write the next chapter in Manchester. So thanks for being involved and being here.
Sarah. Yep. Now I'm going to hand it right to Brian Wright. Brian.
Right. Thank you so much. Good to see you all. Do we have any first-time people for Planapalooza events? Okay, great. Wonderful. So I'll give you a recap of what we've done as part of this discussion here. We have a lot of slides and we go pretty quickly. The thing to note is we're just presenting a little bit of what we've done, a little bit of what we've heard. There's been so much that we've heard, so much that we've done. I just don't want to keep you here all night. And by the time we're done, I thought you said you were going to keep us here all night. So sorry about that. But hopefully you'll be impressed with how much we've done. When we came to town, we had done some homework. We looked at some data, we did studying some things, we had a few conversations, but all the work that you're going to see presented in these slides is from if you're online, thanks for joining us. I think everybody's muted. there's a chat option there. So if you want to say something, you can type it in the chat and we'll get to it at the end. We're going to have a discussion, a question and answer session at the end. And then that works out there. Great. So if you don't know, in your home, here's the chat. It's just that little file bubble there. If you're on your phone, you hit the three dots and the chat, the option pops up there. So, like I said, I'm Brian Wright. I'm the principal of Town Planning and Urban Design Collaborative. If you've been in the in our pop-up studio in our office there, you'll see that we have a whole crew of people, different disciplines, planners, engineers, and transportation specialists, and sustainability experts, and everybody part of the team. We've kind of gone through a process so far to get to this point. We had the community kickoff back in April. This is the homework. Here we are right now. And then after we're done with tonight, then we'll head back and we'll start working on drafting the plan. We'll create a draft that goes to the planning department and we'll review it to make sure we haven't left anything out or said anything lacking in there that unexpected, and then it will, the public draft will come out and be released to the community, where you'll have an opportunity to actually read it, provide comments to the planning department, then they'll consolidate all those comments and give us direction to move towards the final draft, which will then begin going through the official adoption process. So all of the input that we've received thus far is really, sort of the unofficial process. So get into the official process later. So what we want to do is, make sure that as we're working on creating a plan that, we really come at it from multiple directions. So we have the data and analysis that I talked about. So what we've sort of learned about infrastructure, the economy, various trends, et cetera. And then the community input, all the things that all of you and your friends and neighbors have been sharing with us this week. And thus far throughout the process, and then best practices. So the town staff, wonderful staff of experts in each of their own disciplines and departments, and then you have our help too. So we get to work all over the country, and we're able to bring thoughts and ideas to you that you may not have thought of before. So that's kind of how it all works. And somewhere in the middle, all of these things, the plan starts to be generated. So for those who are first timers, we had the opening presentation a few nights ago, and we talked about big ideas, general topics, things that we learned, the data, and then we had a hands-on workshop where participants here gathered on maps and broke up into little groups and wrote down things, sketched things, had big ideas, and then each group presented their ideas to everybody else so we could hear what everybody was thinking about. And what we saw is, that there was a lot of overlap. After we got into the third group, they started saying, well, most of what we're going to say has already been said, and then continued on after that. And it wasn't a huge group. And so, when I look at a group like this, and a good number of these people are planning staff and my team. And so the actual, Manchesterites, Manchesterians. Anyway, those of you who are from here, it's a small number, and it's a little concerning because we're only planning the future of your town, right? And so you think the more the merrier, the better the ideas. But we know through our experience over the years that as long as we get a bunch of people who didn't come together, at least 10, you can actually really come up with ideas that start to replicate pretty quickly, like we saw in that workshop. So don't worry, but I would encourage you, for those of you who are at home, to participate, because you may not like what the people who are here are telling us, but you might. So far, you guys have been pretty well on the same page about most things, which is pretty nice, pretty easy. So, so we had a mapping workshop as well. We had these technical meetings. This was where our studio was set up. We were all working around the back. And then we had these meetings on different topics like transportation and sustainability. And, the team could actually hear what was being said in the meetings in real time. So they could keep working while we were all talking around the tables. And it was wonderful. here we were at the workspace there. So we had people fill out these little cards. It says one word to describe Manchester now. Separated, artsy, missing identity, diverse, charm, community, funky, groovy. Some of the things we heard. And then in the future, it's still diverse, connected, sustainable, thriving, resilient, proactive, inclusive, equitable, multimodal. It's good. You know, we didn't really get any negative future words. Sometimes people get really bad in the future. So everybody's kind of optimistic, so that's good. The mapping exercise that we did, that I was showing pictures of earlier, we actually take all the information from those maps and put it all together on one big map, and then all the notes that were written on it, we take all those and pull them into our lists. But you can start to see some groupings. So the red dots were areas that people thought needed improvement, blue dots were opportunities, and green were things that people love. And so you start to see clusters develop. So this is the mall up here, if you can't tell. Then you have kind of very industrial park area here. Then there is, thank you. And you know, so you start to, it's kind of interesting, you have different tables, but dots is the same things, right? And so we go, okay, well, what's going on in these places? What are the issues? Why are these red dots here? Why are these blue dots here? And so we start to zoom in. So as we've gone through, we've been trying to extract information. We've been trying to help you think of some ways to move yourself into the future. Just your next concept. What is next for you? So a few of the big ideas, this was mentioned in the introductions, but this idea of good to great. And I said earlier, a few nights ago that you know, in this book they talk about good is the enemy of great. So you're pretty content, things are going pretty well. And so you don't even necessarily think about, well, we really need to fix things or change things or be better. And so that's a good problem to have. And so sometimes it's nice for people from outside to come in and say, oh, well, here's some things you can think about. But this is kind of our theme of the week, good to great. One of the things that came up was the idea of branding. So this is just an example in Waterbury, Vermont. They came up with sort of overall brand of Uncommonly Vermont. But what you can start to see is everything else they did, they start to have a family of brands. And so things start to relate to one another, all the things with Historical Society, Tourism Council, the library. And so that Waterbury brand came through. And then they actually would have branded events and activities as well. So farmers market, croquet tournament, arts festival, and that kind of all works together. And then they take that from on into things like wayfinding, some things you've heard about as well. And so you have that consistent brand forward. So this was one of the things that we think could be helpful for you all in the future. The idea of being innovative, having a small scale manufacturing, super high tech. You don't have to have giant factories these days to do things. And so looking at what does micro manufacturing look like, how that can work around here. We've heard a lot about the housing stuff, the houses that you have. You have all of these capes, the mill cottages, and various things that are built for the mill workers. And so you have an interesting situation here where you have lots and lots of housing that is sort of small scale, which means it's more reasonably priced because it's less square feet. And a lot of places we work, they really struggle to have smaller scale houses, and so they have a lot of bigger stuff. So you have that, but a lot of them are getting older, and so there are issues that come along with that for a lot of asbestos and various things. And so I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but nonetheless, it's like, so how do we find ways to update that? But also, how do we expand the variety of housing options you have in the community? Because now that housing prices have gone so crazy, what we see is actually people, because they can't find a place that is in their price point, and I don't mean that they're in a lower price point, they can't find things that they could afford, even if they can afford more. So they move down market. So they basically can outbid people who can't afford more for a house that sort of typically be more reasonably priced. And so outbid and start pushing each person down in the overall real estate market. And so one of the things that could also be helpful here is actually looking at some more high-rate housing. So thinking about just having a wide array of housing types. So this is a representation of that. We heard a lot about downtown, and that it's pretty good, and a lot of people like it a lot. We know you have this complete streets plan, civilized Main Street there, because right now it's really speedy, and it's not super comfortable to be out there as a pedestrian. We're sitting out outside of our workspace there, and there's the concrete barriers, and we're eating lunch on tables, and this car was whizzing by right over our shoulder, literally like we were a table over. We knew we were safe, that we had concrete barriers in front of us, so we knew it just didn't feel good, right? And so finding ways to kind of work on that. We've been actually looking at your complete streets plan, and we have a few ideas that we'll share with you all too about some things you can think about before you implement that. The other thing is you have a one-sided Main Street, and that would help a lot is if you got a second side to that Main Street. The Wright building that everyone hates and talks about and complains about. It's one of the few buildings on that side of the street, but it's obviously not well loved. It happens to be located in the right place. It's pulled up the street, which is nice, but it could be a mixed-use building similar to the other side of the street, and start finding ways to fill in. So this is an example of an infill lot. This is there's a parking lot basically behind here. So these are some little live work units that filled in a lot there. But really just trying to create a vibrant streetscape, and you start to see, the two-sided Main Street. This is our Main Street in Franklin, Tennessee, where I live. You have that sense of enclosure, and you have lots of traffic goes through here. Both vehicular, but most importantly for the businesses, pedestrian traffic. Lots of that. We've been thinking about ways to incorporate sustainability. It's been a thing throughout the week, and so stormwater is part of that. Really wanting to not only deal with stormwater, but also make stormwater something that enhances the quality of the place and the character of the community. So you can start to see stormwater solutions that are both functional and beautiful would be part of that. The idea, John will talk about a little bit, probably cover this idea of sponge neighborhoods by looking at ways that when you do development, when you have new buildings or new sites that are developed, finding ways to actually use those sites in development to treat the water and actually hold it and make it cleaner as it goes through. So this sponge concept is something that is really cool. John's been working on. We talked about the idea of so these days, now that people can live about anywhere they want remotely work, it becomes really important for you to have the proper technological infrastructure. And so we've been learning about things that are going on in the state, in the region, getting fiber and high-speed internet. And that seems like that was an important thing to do moving forward. We heard a lot about the landfill. I've been studying that and been learning about how important it is to your economy, and just looking at, what can happen with the landfill one day when it's run its life cycle. And this idea of a campus, landfill campus strategies evolving. And this is kind of a neat example. This is another community, and they have sort of a landfill and these wastewater lagoons. So you can imagine not the most exciting place that you probably want to hang out. But they had a vision for the future and started to move forward with it and implement it. And this is the same site. Fast forward several years. And so they actually made a recreation park setting here on one of those development. So again, with the sustainability concepts, looking at alternative energy, we heard about getting smart lights throughout the town. And so this is kind of neat. These lights come on sort of as you need, and they have motion sensors. And so if you pick down the street, the way I think about it is there's like a really cool person and sort of the street lights just for the as they walk. So you can imagine that. But looking at electric buses and charging stations and solar panels and all of the things that you typically think about, trying to find ways to incorporate that. Because this idea of good to great, one of the ways that we're thinking about that is, physically down, it's pretty great, you know, looks good, sorry, looks good. And the way that we can go from good to great is say overlay the idea of sustainability onto it. So that's one of the key focuses as we move forward. The other thing is creating a civic destination strategy. We have heard a lot about the library moving and building, and we know there's lots of interest and different groups want to go in there. The good news is the groups that are interested in going in there are things that you want to have in a downtown. And so how can we take those things, whoever ends up with the building and those who don't, and find a way to create a civic destination strategy so that you actually get that energy of them all sort of working together. So you might go to a children's museum and then you may go down the way and go do something else with the kids, and you're kind of circulating through downtown, and as you go between one and the next, then maybe you go grab a bite to eat. So you're patronizing the businesses, etc. So Claire, can you come up and walk us through the framework here? We've been looking at it a little bit, the big picture concepts related to, you have all these assets, different things around town, and so you tie them all together. So Claire's going to talk as well.
Hey there. So we've built a framework, a couple of slides that will walk you through, each kind of building on each other. Where we started, we really started with the opening presentation, hands-on workshop, where people were marking things that they liked and telling us about the extensive trail network that you already have and how we can build off of that. So here we've got the Cheney River Trail. I would use the pointer. There we go. Cheney River Trail, Union Pond, Robertson Park, as well as your East Coast Greenway / another name you guys like to use for it too. There we go. And then of course, we've also got on top of this, the dark green are your actual parks and playgrounds. And the light green are the protected open space. So we started with your parks and recreation plan as well, but then we added on a few things that we'd heard about that we weren't seeing represented on that map to give you a more comprehensive view of what assets you do have here. So being able to look at the network is really important so that one, we can see what is connected and what's not. We'll see the dashed is what's been proposed as new connections, whether they're on street or on trail. We didn't get that granular, but we wanted you guys to see where you're going. This was already proposed, but what we've built on top of that is we've looked at environmental justice communities. These are communities that are they're lower income. They need to be more connected with amenities in the community. And so we've overlaid that on this green network. And then on top of that, we've added the assets, activity nodes, other assets, activity nodes, landmarks, things like the schools and the library, the new community center up at Robertson Park. This way we make sure that we have those connections for pedestrians first, because that's the most equitable way to get around. And then we've also looked at it from a transportation standpoint as well. One of our big concepts is to make sure that we build off of these nodes and make sure that we have residential next to these destinations to improve resiliency and accessibility. And then these are the focus areas, which you'll see come up at the end. We've done 4 focus area plans. We originally started with 5, but you'll see up at the top your Depot Square and then what you call the industrial park. We're really connected along the Hop River Trail, and we thought that they would both benefit by strengthening that connection, so they've kind of merged together, and you'll see that later.
So transportation came up a little bit, not as much as it does in a lot of communities, actually. A lot of places we work, it's like the #1 issue. Traffic, you guys had a few places that you had concerns about, and so we've been looking at those. But it was more about how do we increase our transit rather than just having a bunch of issues. So as I said, the Downtown Complete Streets project is moving forward. We have been looking at some big picture strategies, looking to have multimodal mobility, so it's not just about cars. So we really want to incorporate pedestrians and cyclists as well. And then looking at the idea of the context, depending on where a street is, what the environment is that it's running through, the character of the street should change. And so the same street could be running through a residential neighborhood. It should have a different character than if that same street were going through the suburban commercial strip highway. And then if it were in downtown, right? So this idea of context sensitive thoroughfare design is an important thing, as well as complete streets. And then trying to find ways to incorporate transit stops and last mile micro mobility into your networks are some of the things we're thinking about as well. And so, trying to find, thinking through and leaving you all with a kit of parts when it comes to transportation, because, you'll have different opportunities that will come up. You'll have different priorities. Certain streets will be repaved, or you need to redo some utility. You have things torn up anyway, while you're at it, fix this or that. But also too, we learned that there are several streets around town that maybe have needed some work for a while. And so just from an equity standpoint, trying to make sure that we're sort of equitably using our resources in the community to make those repairs and improvements. So making sure we've got all the proper facilities for safe routes to school, that's what I was talking about, so people can move around to these assets and community assets and destinations and parks as well. Because not everybody has access to a car. Maybe not everybody has access to multiple cars, like some things as well. So thinking through that. So as I mentioned, some of the smaller scale transit options we've been looking at, trying to find ways to build off of what you've got. We've heard that we don't have very good local transit, that kind of a loop around town that works very well for the community. And we've heard that the sort of express to Hartford is pretty good. Get you there quickly, and that's good. So we've been trying to learn about your successes and your struggles throughout the process. So Matt, talk about the infrastructure for us a little bit, and it's such a sweet on the nuts and bolts.
Great, thank you. And like Brian had mentioned in the opening, we've had several kind of teams of consultants running side by side. And so I was working with a team of folks who were really looking at the impacts of what would happen, especially the infrastructure, and to support the different ideas that were coming up in the community. We're able to work a lot with our partners within the town, the different departments that they represent for infrastructure categories. We're always listening, as Brian had mentioned, as we were around that big table, you all were speaking, we were jotting down notes that you wanted more of this or less of this, or wouldn't it be nice to fix that? And so we've got some information to share with you that we generated this week, but we also have a tremendous amount more in terms of numbers and analysis and those kind of things that will continue to evolve between now and the draft document, but there'll be a lot more kind of proof of concept and things that make it into the writing for some of the things we've talked about today. One of the most important things that we thought, even as an infrastructure focus for this team, was beating the drum again about character. So traditionally, when you look at a comprehensive plan, by the time you get to a chapter on infrastructure, it's a little further back in the document. Sometimes we forget about what the real main charge is here. So we thought it was important to just kind of unify ourselves again and talk about character being, really the defining element of this entire process, as well as the document that will result. And if we can all get behind the same character as service providers, we can all reach the same vision and make sure we're proud of the places that we live, work, and play. So the other thing we did was we recognized the fact that infrastructure is about providing supply. It's about meeting the needs of the community, but what is the demand? So we go back to the different land uses, how they're organized. So we look at development types, locations, patterns, and intensities. And as part of this process, we went back to your original 2012 plan and found your character plan that you see on the left. And generally speaking, for the assessment we were able to do this week, it seemed logical. It seems like a good framework. And for a place that's largely built out as you are, there's no reason to throw it out just because we're writing a new plan. It's got a lot of merit. And so we're going to start with that and just fine tune some things. So both the organization that you see from the previous plan of the city, of the town as a whole, as well as the ingredients, the different colors that you see on that map, we think are generally going to stay the same for this new document. And instead, on the right-hand side, you've heard the allusion now a couple of times to focus areas, and you're going to see more information on that as we go through the presentation. That's really where we were drilling down a little bit into those focus areas and trying to see the what's, the hows, and the whens those things might take off and what could occur there. So those of you who were here with us at the opening saw that I pulled this sentence out of your previous plan, and I was really excited about it because you were looking proactively towards the future about as population is changing, your demands were changing, things were aging. How are you going to accomplish the goals? Recognize the fact that you don't have unlimited resources, and how do you prioritize things in that? So those were some of the conversations that we started to have throughout the week. And as part of that, we wanted to recognize kind of where are you as a community? And so, as I mentioned, we had done some number crunching and the like, and maybe some of you had met Trip Muldrow when he was here, our economist. And we did this with staff. We just kind of looked at, what is the growth projection? How big and how fast are we looking at Manchester becoming within the horizon that we're looking at for this plan update? And you can see, generally speaking, it's fairly flat. If you look at the last 20 years that we had, 2000 to 2020, you can see you welcomed about a new resident about every day and a half. Somebody came and said, hey, I want to move to Manchester, and they did. And if we go from 2020 to 2040, you can see that actually that's slowing down a little bit. Now, in context, it's actually good news because in the state and the region, they're actually declining and losing some population. You show that you're going to be gaining, but it's going to be at a slower pace than maybe some communities we work in are used to having, and that's fine. That's a sign of a stable community, but we just need to know that because that affects some of the recommendations that we make. To kind of prove how we were listening to all those meetings, the gentleman in the back, if you remember, you'd given us a bunch of permit numbers, and I wrote those things down as fast as you were saying. I had to listen to the video 2 more times to make sure I got them. But thank you for that. And so as you look at this, these were new building permits that had been issued, and not always for a new unit, sometimes just for a renovation. But again, you can see that they're generally low. And so when we look at these things and we look at some of the plans that are presented later in the evening, sometimes we'll have to practice patience. It may take us a little while to get some of these things that we want, and that's okay. But it's about the commitment, whether it's in this plan and maybe even the next plan. You just have to stay committed to the course and vision that's set. And these different big ideas that we brought up. So then we actually looked within the boundaries of the town itself, and you'll recognize that people are in different growth cycles. And you can see here, this is a concept that we have on the left. Some areas of the town are still growing rapidly. Some of what we might consider stable, they're just kind of going along. They've had investments recently. Ultimately, all parts of the community start to decline. Either their infrastructure starts to age, the buildings start to age, maybe the property owners aren't putting in the investments like they might like to or wish they could, and then they reinvent themselves. And so like when we get to the focus areas, we're talking about some of the reinvestment opportunities, how we strengthen these neighborhoods or these destinations. And so we also have to recognize where different parts of the town are in this process, because that will focus where you can put limited resources to make sure everybody is doing very well within the community. And so we're going to look at ways that we can lengthen the cycles that we enjoy, and we shorten the cycles that we would rather not be in very long. The other thing that we talked about here was when we talk about infrastructure, everybody gets excited when the new building opens, when the new vehicle is released, when we cut the ribbon. But right after that, now you own it. You own it forever. So after you do that, how do you stay on top of things so that you stay sustainable and financially in a good position in order to be a thriving community going forward? And so we talk about the 4 phases in infrastructure. There's the capital cost when you buy or build it. Then every year you have to operate it or maintain it, keep it up and running. And then ultimately you have to replace that. Now that might be like a vehicle replacement, or it might be like a major investment in a road or something like that to get it back up to speed. Maybe put an extra lift of asphalt on there or something like that. But there's a major investment that goes on there. So knowing this and where all your projects are in their cycles also helps us prepare the best strategy for the new plan. And so as you look at this kind of in a graph format, you see that there's a large cost when you purchase something or you build something new. And then there's a reoccurring cost that occurs every year. And then ultimately you have to replace it. And hopefully, in this example being more like a road project, you don't have to acquire new right of way again and stuff like that. So it's not quite as expensive to build as it was the first time, but it is a significant investment. And some of these things we're looking at 20 or 30-year life cycles. So well beyond the horizons of the plan, but we need to think about those kind of things so we make sure the compass points in the right direction. And so what happened, and thankfully, as we did our research and talked with you all, this is not happening here readily, but in some places they have what's called deferred maintenance. And it means we have too many things to spend our money on, so we're going to ignore some things and just let them kind of age while we point and try to fix some other things. Well, those things that got ignored, they don't stop aging, they don't stop deteriorating, so we have to keep our eye on them. I was encouraged to hear about the bonding programs that you have here, and some of the maintenance dollars you're spending, and so I like at least the direction you're heading. Obviously, you wish you had more money, right? So you could take care of everything, but I at least like where you're headed on this. What happens is if you ignore those years and you keep ignoring the same thing year over year, you end up with a big fix that's more of a maintenance fix that you didn't have to do, except for the fact that you ignored it leading up to that point. Usually there are emergencies. You read the newspaper where a pipe breaks or bursts or something of that nature. Everybody panics. All the money goes to fix that. And it wouldn't have been as expensive of a fix if we had been monitoring and investing in it year after year. So that's also something we're looking at as part of this plan. Then the last thing I'll tell you is the briefing for today was about the big ideas, the vision, where things could be headed. I just reassure you, for anybody who is skeptical, there's an analysis that's going on behind all of this as you know. And so one of the other things we did this week was we created some tools and we calibrated them with the different department heads and working with members of the community. And they'll be running in the background as soon as we finish this presentation, so ready to go. And when Brian talks about what's going on in some of these areas in terms of what we've heard and what we might recommend, we're also translating those into what development potential they might have. And I know this might be new for some members in this community, but we're actually going to calculate. So when you look at a drawing and we say, well, how many more residents are coming if we draw it this way? Well, how many more students might come? Or we look at how many police officers you have right now in the community. We say, well, if we have this many more residents, you might need this many more police officers. Or fire, or library, what is the demand on water and sewer? And once you enumerate those things and you have numbers, then we can start to write policies to try to make sure that those are available concurrently when the development occurs. So all that stuff will be going on. I'm not going to show you the numbers today. The drawings are much nicer to look at. But by the time we get to the drafting of the document, there will be some sort of proof in the pudding, so to speak, that will go to strengthen the recommendations.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. My name is John. I'm a civil engineer, and I've been working on sustainability, resilience, and open space. That's what been my focus here in Manchester. And these topics are really interesting and they're fascinating for Manchester, especially for a plan of conservation and development. This is not really one segment within the plan. It's not one segment within what makes Manchester tick. It's really something woven through everything that Manchester is and will be, from transportation to energy, green infrastructure, healthy communities, how you get around. Sustainability and resilience really interwoven through the town. And so you've heard about some of that already. I'm going to go through a few other things. But maybe first, what is sustainability and resilience in the first place? I think a lot of folks have different definitions for those vocabulary words. And that was really my first question in coming to Manchester is, what does sustainability and resilience mean to Manchester? Sustainability, the way I would typically define it, and you'll see it defined, is the ability for us to make decisions to meet our current needs while not compromising the needs of future generations. And resilience the ability to be prepared and withstand shocks and stresses that we may not know are coming. So in other words, sustainability, enduring, and resilience, prepared and tough and strong. And so in Manchester's not on the coast, but is still facing challenges from climate change, severity and frequency of storm events that we're already seeing here. Heat, drought, other external shocks and stresses, for example, they're not all environmental. COVID is a shock to the system for all of us. And so how is Manchester prepared to deal with the unexpected? And we know change is constant. So this is going to keep coming. Some of the numbers here from Connecticut, DEP, and Yukon, these are 2019 numbers for Hartford. I'm going to have Claire's challenge here. So by the year 2100, we're seeing, and we're already seeing, an increase in the frequency and severity of storm events by almost 10%. So we're getting more rain, and intense rainstorms, especially in the winter and the spring. In between, in the summer, decrease in water availability. So basically that means the difference between precipitation and what existing natural systems can soak up and get back into the air via evapotranspiration is going to go down. So there'll be less water available in the summer, and it's getting hotter. So many more days. There's a range here depending on different scientific evaluations of emissions and carbon, but basically, and we're seeing it, it's getting worse. So this isn't all going to happen in the year 2099. I know we're looking far into the future, but these are challenges we all face today. And like I said, the POCD, the Plan of Conservation and Development, and looking further afield, further out into the future, and planning a series of steps to get us there is a perfect tool for Manchester to start to keep addressing sustainability and resilience. And you're doing it. The town's commitment is on paper, it's in writing. The Sustainability Committee is doing great things already. So you're ahead of many of your peers, and it's awesome to see, and you've seen this week, the passion in town. It's fantastic. So I'm not going to read this, but the goal is to improve resiliency, to reduce emissions and address energy. And I like these two: be transformative and serve as a model. So we have leadership here. We have a lot to build on in terms of the energy in town, commitment to sustainability and resiliency. I love it. So our goal is really to pick up Manchester 2020, which is the current plan, and to say what are we building upon? Things like maintaining conservation land. These are our build to indoor strategies. Here's how we're going to get there. Build the momentum, keep the momentum going. Maintain conservation land, encourage sustainable redevelopment. Brian went through some of this already. Be a sponge town, neighborhoods that can, instead of having pavement and building roofs alone, add as much green as we can. Where can we take pavement away and replace it with planted area so that storm runoff can be reduced over time, because the precipitation is going to keep going up. That helps water quality. That helps provide a relief from the heat, which is going to get to be more of a challenge, and it makes our neighborhoods more beautiful. Here's an idea I'm kind of throwing out there to the community for something to consider. We've worked in other municipalities that are working on resilience hubs, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So are there community facilities that can serve to disseminate information, connect people, and also be there in times of stress and emergency for shelter, cooling centers, and that kind of thing in the community. And then I think you're working on minimizing solid waste impacts, addressing energy, food security, so reducing barriers to agriculture in the community, whether that be farms or community gardens, and even a garden in your yard. And increasing ped bike connectivity. As Claire mentioned, that's equitable transportation for folks. Maybe they can't afford a car to get around, gets people out of their car, reduces traffic. And hey, it's good for you. And so one thing we saw, and that's very, very common in communities, is a number of initiatives in multiple of these areas. And I would say Manchester is working on almost all of these. But maybe a framework that hasn't put them all on the same piece of paper yet. And so how in Manchester can this plan serve as a tool to do that? And what Claire went through with putting all of those assets on the map along with proposed trails from your parks plan, which is awesome. To start to say maybe there's some realignment or maybe reprioritization, thinking about sustainability, resiliency, community assets, and civic connections to retweak and maybe realign those. And I think we'll see a little bit of that in the focus areas as well. So to connect across strategies and departments. Many of your departments, I've spent a lot of time with them this week, parks, environment, planning, are really come a long way and have plans so far ahead of your peers. And I think we can take that from good to great. Indicators of success are critical for sustainability and resiliency to measure steps over time. And I'm not going to go through these except to say that there's really the opportunity here to measure progress and also to look at these through the lens of equity and inclusion, to say how are we improving, for example, proximity of housing to parks and proximity of housing to environmental hazards or other hazards, specifically for underserved populations. And that's something that the town is committing to. We can measure that. So I mentioned resilience hubs. So this is an interesting idea where the municipality, we've looked with some municipalities, we've done this in Providence, wherever, where an existing community asset, and this doesn't take a lot of resources, can start to kind of bring in ideas of resilience and sustainability in terms of building community, modeling ecological features. So building green infrastructure and planting trees outside of an existing community center. Preparing for disasters and response, emergency response. So these are places people can go if there's a bad storm. They can go if their power goes out. But maybe as important, and again, Manchester's doing an incredible job with this, with community centers that serve as places for people to connect with each other. So if there's future economic stress, you know your neighbors. During a storm, you know where to go. You have those social networks, and those can go from good to great over time. And these could be a tool for that. So this is, just thinking today. There's work to be done here. If this is something the community likes, which community centers, the library, high school, could start to think about bringing information about climate change in, posting more into departmental meetings, public events, Planapaloozas, talk about this kind of thing. Okay, so open space. We heard a lot this week about Manchester having plans. You've worked really hard on your long-term plans for open space, recreation, and connectivity. And the plans are really good. So that's number 1 and 2 on the list. Let's implement those plans. And we are fully supportive of that. I think the taking good to great from open space and rec really is connecting those plans, connecting across multiple plans and initiatives. So that could be the library siting, the school decommissioning, another initiative in town that can maybe be better integrated with planning. And I'll show a quick sketch of that in a minute. Focusing, like I'm really stressing on underserved populations in downtown, which has been a key theme we've heard, like everywhere. Sustainability from parks and open space and rec perspective means balancing construction of new stuff with taking care of what you have. So making sure there's continued investment and maintenance of what you have. And we heard a lot about connections between the town and nonprofit organizations and volunteers that want to go out after a storm and clear out the park or take care of invasives. So there are a lot of models in other communities for memorandum of understanding between nonprofits to say, we're going to help the town take care of a trail. Here's how we're going to do it. We're going to meet every other month to make sure we're all on track. Also opportunities maybe to centralize volunteering through an app was discussed this week. So maybe some kind of technical tools that could help with that, and also maybe address investments in park maintenance by crowdsourcing. So we took some of the maps that Claire had shown that showed existing assets and resources and kind of sketched on top of them this week to say, given the current investments forthcoming in Center Springs Park, Charter Oak West, the ability for those really to be beefed up to serve as invitations to downtown from the East Coast Greenway, but I think most especially to connect between the east side and west side, potential for a historic loop kind of in the center, so that people that live here, especially those people that rely upon walking and biking to get around, can utilize the system to get to and from downtown, to get to and from schools, to get to and from community centers that could be built out over time as resilience hubs, and then to get north and south on the rail trail to community centers in the north end, river, and improvements in Union Pond Park. So work to be done here, but a way to start getting from good to great in terms of series of steps, open space, parks and rec, to get connected.
All right, we're in the home stretch here. So, you know, John mentioned in a couple of different times throughout this, we've talked about this a little bit, but in addition to sustainability being sort of overlaid on all of the other things that we're thinking about with the town, the other thing is to overlay, sort of look at and evaluate decisions through, through a lens of equity. And so that's one of those other good to great strategies, kind of sustainability, equity, and really trying to find ways that, each part of this plan will have the sustainable and equitable elements featured as a path forward to what is next. What I'm about to show you here are a bunch of things that may raise your eyebrows, that may raise your spirits, that you get excited about them, you get concerned about them. These are plans that we've drawn in these areas. Buckland Hills, the Depot Square on the Hop River Innovation Park, Midtown and Spencer Street. These are intended to illustrate ideas. So when people have been talking about walkable, bikeable housing choices, all these things, we're illustrating how you can do these things and pick these areas because the dots on the maps kind of led us to these spots. And they also happen to sync up with, just from a planner's perspective, what we were thinking, like these areas may be good locations to explore some of these ideas. So what we found over the years is that if we simply just talk about things and we just write words and we say, be more walkable or have a better mix of housing types or whatever, it's a bit hard for the community to respond to. And then sometimes we draw these plans and people get really excited about it, and the property owner actually goes, wow, that's really cool. I've never thought of that. That's what the town's interested in seeing. Let's do it, And so sometimes just these, illustrations inspire action. And so I'm going to run you through these really quickly. We're going to talk about some of the details, not all of the details, because it could take a long time for us to go through these. But starting with the Spencer Street corridor. So here it is currently, as you know it now, here's Spencer Street. This is sort of, suburban strip development, strip malls, I'm sure you all know it well. And, this is not one of the places where you featured on your Instagram feed. It's not on the town webpage. You don't have a postcard of this, right? But it may be useful. You may go to these places, right? And it just so happens that people actually live around and amongst, and there's lots of things going on. So we took some liberties. If you own the property, hopefully you like it, but if you don't, that's okay. You don't have to do what we've drawn here, so don't freak out. So this is a today, and here we go showing an after. So what you see is the light pink buildings are existing buildings that have been maintained. So here's the strip center as it is, strip center. But what we've actually started to do is try to make a place here, right? And so you can see that we have some mixed use buildings. These orange buildings are mixed use. We have some row houses, the townhouses here. You start to define streetscapes along here. So here's parks and trails and green spaces, green networks. There's actually some single family detached houses as well. There's some multifamily going on. There's some mixed use, so kind of a node here, and then mixed use along here. This is the proposed senior center, I think, that's here. And so we basically just taken the sort of inefficiently used land and the sort of extra parking that you find in these places and started to infill around it. So big picture, big idea. There's a million ways we could have done this. Adjust the plan a bunch of different ways, but in the few days that we've been here, this is what we came up with for the Spencer Street corridor. And you may say, well, how do you transform a suburban place like that? So this is what take you through a series here of what we call Suburban Retrofit. So here's imagine a sort of a big mid-box kind of a store or a strip mall or whatever. There's some out parcels a lot of times that are there usually. And so you can start to see over time, oh, it starts to look kind of like a Main Street area, right? And so there's some mixed use going on here and filling the parking. Now you're actually starting to create a streetscape along the busy highway here, infilling, and then you go a step further. We just went totally wacky, right? And we got some structured parking, and so you can really fill in. And then one day, they say, maybe we won't have big lots anymore. And so that land now becomes something else. And so all of a sudden, this now looks like a real place. It looks like a neighborhood that you may take a picture of and put on your Instagram feed. So that's just an example of how that could happen. And the key is here also is that progression over time. Because if you saw the before and the after that I showed you on the plan, you could imagine, wow, that'd be a huge change. What would happen piece by piece over time? So all of the things we're going to show you here in these different areas, the same thing should be said. Don't imagine what would happen overnight. So, we're going to tell us about Depot Square.
So Depot Square, so I have to make one plug for the planning department. We looked at the maps, and we always do, and we actually adjust and make sure that we choose those focus areas off of what you said. But unlike other places, what the planning department showed us what might be the focus areas you'd want us to look at were exactly the dots that you put on the map. So when we took a tour through the city to see a couple of these places, and I say that because it's great to be so aligned with your government, so you can really trust that they're listening. But also, when we were taking a tour of the different focus areas, Depot Square was the most, I didn't know why, that you guys had suggested us to look at it. I didn't know why it's called a Depot Square. I didn't really know where I was. I did see a railroad, which kind of started to clue me in a bit. But then I was told by several people, including Bob, about these really cool maps that I could find online and in several restaurants and at the 8th Fire Department and so on. And so I found these maps, and I saw what it used to be, what the depot looked like, what you still have there. I was told by Eric about the Hilliard Mills that had been redeveloped, and I started to think, how could this area kind of re-stitch itself to become a Depot Square again? So I actually also, the Parks and Rec department and the plan is great too. It had kind of this community center and the Robertson Park plans. I've actually photoshopped that into my drawing because it's like John was saying, that's one of the things that absolutely has to be implemented. It's really exciting. And so I wanted to build off of what you guys already have. So, so you've got your Cheney River Trail. This was so I think it was the North Manchester Rail Spur, and then you've got the New York New England Rail that was there, and then it connects up to the Hop River Trail. So, you know, you've got the trail that's beginning, but how can we kind of face buildings onto it, activate it, you know, where you can be walking along the trail with your dog, grab a beer maybe at one of the breweries on the river. There were a couple of really cool industrial buildings that were left from the rail days. So we've kind of envisioned that. And before I get to the rendering, we've also tied it to the trail here, to the office park. The office park is on the Hop River Trail, and office park or industrial park isn't really a very flashy or exciting name. And right now it's not really a very flashy or exciting place. But as Tripp said, Manchester could use a little bit of a rebranding and promoting your assets. One asset is that connection to the Hop River Trail. And so by having your industrial park maybe become an innovation park with some micro manufacturing and also still have the office uses, but start fronting onto the trail, maybe provide informal recreation place for when the people that work there or students that are co-oping there could go out and play a soccer game or could go and sit in the plaza and have their lunch. So just kind of creating a place, it doesn't have to be big, but it just something to kind of have a place where people can come out of their office buildings, sit down and talk to somebody who may work from across the plaza and start sharing ideas. So I'll get to the pretty part so you can see what I'm talking about. So this is one of those historic looking buildings from the rail days. You've also got in the illustration that I saw from 1914 had this building in it, it had that one, and it also had this church. So we started to imagine how we could kind of bring these pieces back together that are all along your parks and recreation trails that are going to be connected, and how to kind of bring the urban environment onto those trips. And then back here, you'll see your Robertson Park. Kind of, you've got your community center, the high school, the school is still there, the historic part of it. And a little bit of a plaza here so that you, once you arrive, you feel like, hey, I am sitting there and I can kind of sit and hang out and enjoy it. I also added some residential onto the trail to kind of have eyes on the trail at night, so it's kind of a safe place. And as Matt reminded us, this might be, you know, a little bit in the future, but it's got to kind of phase into it. Then the Hop River Innovation Park, we chose this area as before, kept all the same buildings. You'll see the huge footprints here, but just kind of activated those spaces, added one retail, maybe a sandwich shop that sells maybe some beer. And then, you know, you're also activating on this park. So people that are recreating can pass by too. So it's not just office workers, but people that are connecting from other communities or as you're going out. In town.
So as we look at your population trend and your growth projections for the future, what you may be starting to realize is this may be the 100-year plan, right? As we're showing you these things. And so that can be exciting, but we also will need to do those reality checks on the road. So we looked at the Midtown area around the hospital. We are looking at transforming it into a wellness district, we call it. And so a wellness district incorporates things beyond just the medical component, so that it's not just when you're having a problem and you need to go to the doctor. It's actually about creating an area where you're, you know, having a healthy life and you're keeping yourself well. And so the hospital is the last place you end up, and a lot, you know, the medical industry has really been moving in that direction right now. So what we've shown is here's the hospital right there, and then looking at how to have hospital expansion. So this is a new annex building there. We actually, depending on what type of services the hospital is providing, you know, a lot of times family members come along with the patient. So if you're having a sort of a long-term stay, so, you know, is there an opportunity maybe to have a hotel there? We have houses across the street here. Right now they're facing parking lots. And so we're thinking about, well, the ways that we can start to redevelop a parking lot or by having structured parking. But nobody wants to look at the type of parking garage. And so we've actually shown row houses that are hiding these parking garages here. We actually have some areas for agriculture. So you can actually grow healthy food that can be served in the restaurant, cafeteria, in the hospital, and also some mixed use. Maybe a restaurant if you don't want to go to the cafeteria. It also could be getting the produce from here. We've shown some community garden plots as well, so the neighbors that are adjacent can start coming in here. And then we started to infill along the corridor here, because right now you have sort of a lot of car lots and parking lots. We're used to having this sort of buildings being torn down. Now it's not this very nice experience along the street there. So we started infilling. So that's what these buildings are. And here's Walgreens. Actually, Walgreens is right here. And just as an illustration again, Walgreens pulled up to the street. In the first place, it would have been better than having it back with a parking lot in front of it. So we were showing, don't imagine that they actually get that inspired by this plan. But moving it up a bit, and Walgreens also tends to have blank walls on the side of it with park. They don't make it into a streetscape. And here we're actually showing what we call liner buildings. So these would be very sort of narrow retail spaces, maybe some incubated retail that activates the dead walls of the Walgreens. The gas station is here. This is what we call gas backwards, where we've actually taken the convenience store part of the gas station and it's in the front up to the street, and the pumps are in the rear. So you actually go there. It's being done all over the place. And so that's how that works. And then part of wellness is being active. And so we're showing, kind of building on your history and your fondness for trails. So here you see sort of a trail network that circulates all through and around the property, and some civic space, pocket parks there. So really just trying to transform this district and repair the streetscape as well. So here it is, here's the hospital, here's that Walgreens. These buildings are gone, unfortunately, in other parking lots. But in this view on Google, they were there. But one thing that is encouraging is this parking lot is now an outdoor dining area. So you guys are already doing these things that we are talk about in communities all around the country. So here are the big empty parking lots. Now these houses are facing onto. So this is what it could look like in the future. So here's the Walgreens pulled up with the liner buildings, civic space, working with that outdoor dining area. We've put this building back, lining that, where there's a building that pulled out for parking lots. The parking's still there, but the buildings are there. Here we're showing some, maybe some multifamily, some outdoor dining areas. Here you can see where we repaired the streetscape buildings have gone in, or at least car lots are. Here you can see the agricultural area, the hospital annex building, parking garages are here, and the townhouses that wrap around it. And so really just sort of overall improving this, making it a much more enjoyable place to be, not just for the hospital, but hopefully for actually people who live around it. So big picture, very aspirational, but could be. So Buckland Hills, what do we do about the mall? So that everybody says our mall's kind of struggling. Don't feel too bad because they all are all across the country. We were just working last week in Indiana on the mall redevelopment project. So it's kind of sad when you're there. There's a bunch of land that's a bunch of parking around this struggling big commercial space. So we started trying to figure out what are some things we could do to transform that, to solve some housing needs, et cetera. Be prepared to raise your eyebrows. Okay, so we left the mall. Some of these mall redevelopment strategies actually get rid of the mall. Some of them get rid of some of the inline stores, leave the anchors, but we were being sort of modest, so we left the mall alone. And what you see though, we started infilling the parking lot. So we had to, in order to do that, you structured parking, right? And so, but the structured parking goes inside the block, it doesn't kind of hang out. And so we have mixed use of this main new corridor that kind of goes through here. There's mixed use, there's commercial space. We added on some of those blank walls of the mall. So we have smaller steel shops out there. We have some new residential opportunities. These are the existing hotels. We actually are showing a residential tower because the views are incredible off here. And so each of these little pieces are also residential. So you have the views, like you'll have multiple units facing in on these courtyards, and you're on your balcony, you look out and you have that long, amazing view into the distance. But along the streetscape, you have nice buildings, doesn't seem so huge. And there's these little pocket parks all along, little plazas, little intimate spaces, just I think there's a lot here. I could go on forever, but the most important part is the heart of this is all civic space. So there's little parks and plazas, small commercial buildings, maybe a restaurant with some upper area for dining up on the roof. Tables would be out here with bistro lights strung between them. Here's the entrance to the mall. And we kind of need if this actually broke through, because what I call this the mullet plan, not the fish, but the haircut, right? And so the reason I say that is, the mullet is like I say, business in the front, party in the back. Well, here, this is like the residential mixed use in the front, and in the back, we actually did something very different to show you the number of things you can do. And so what you may notice here, this is agriculture, right? And so we talked about how Burlington, Vermont provides like 10% of their food within less than a mile of downtown. And so we're trying to find opportunities for agriculture. Here you see, we heard that there's a need for an indoor track. And so we have this really cool regional or state kind of indoor track facility here, maybe a aquatic center as part of that. And then just trying to figure out what to do for more recreation. We did an outdoor track as well. I don't know if indoor and outdoor track talk to each other, but nonetheless, we have outdoor track. So you have track and field events here, and then there's a soccer field in the middle sometimes. But again, if you go to a big tournament, we heard that you may be there for 6 to 8 hours, and so waiting on your kid to run or whoever. So maybe I want you to do something else in between, instead of just sitting there watching kids that don't know. And so you just kind of wander through and go experience what's here, and then you come back for your turn. But we've also, in addition to the agriculture and the sort of row crops or whatnot, we've actually shown an orchard in the parking lot for the track. So you park in the orchard, and then the orchard expands over here, and then kind of wraps all around. And so you may want to, between races, want to grab an apple, grab a snack right there. So that happens, and then we're actually showing a hotel here as well. So I know sometimes people travel a good distance and they go to cities, but no. You may say we have no need for a track into a facility or whatever. Fine, right? The idea is just to show the number of different options you can do, because this is a huge area. And again, when we start actually counting how many units of residential and office space, square feet, and commercial that we could possibly get here, it's well beyond what the market is, right? And so what you see a lot of times in these mall redevelopment projects, and I did it when I laid this out, this is sort of like one of the like wedges of the parking lot. And so that'll redevelop. And then another wedge, another piece of the parking lot, and then another piece. So there's a natural, like they always are phased. And so this could take a long time to do. But the point is, you could do a lot. There's an asset there in that mall. So we have a rendering that we're working on that's specific to this plan. And I can't wait for you to see it, but you're not going to see it tonight. But what you will see is another one we've done. This is an interesting one. And this version is a little smaller scale, so their parking lots are not quite as robust, but you get the idea. Hey, look, there's that loop road you guys had. Hey, there's these out parcel areas that you guys had. And in the scheme I'm about to show you, actually kept 3 of the anchors, and we got rid of one of the anchors and all the inline stores. And so this is what that looked like. And so here there's 3 anchors. Now we have this grand park area in the middle. You see the structured parking in the middle of a block. So you have mixed use, you have some office opportunities, there's a civic building there, maybe say that, I don't want to propose, but I think in this case it was a library, but your library probably shouldn't go to the mall for what it's worth. And we also did a road diet on the road here. So we started to civilize that. We actually turned it into a multi-way boulevard. So there's these sort of side, what we call slip lanes with on-street parking and street trees. And then the sort of regional faster traffic kind of stayed in the middle lanes. Right. So anyway, you get the idea. Mall redevelopment is a thing that's happening all over the country. You all have an opportunity to be part of that. But that's what we've done so far for the past 4 days, 5 days. Thoughts, questions, we've got on the table. You can do a packet. So if you aren't here tonight, or know somebody didn't come, you can fill out the packet and share that information. What do you think? Did we hear what you said? Usually at this point, people say, I didn't hear you say anything about this. I can't believe that. Just because I didn't say it doesn't mean we aren't thinking it and it won't show up in the plan. It's just, I don't know how long we've been talking, like a long time. So, how we do? Yes, Gene.
Brian, what do you mean by structured parking?
The garage, the parking structure, the garage.
But you're hiding them?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. So
that's where the mall shoppers will park?
Yeah, and the people who live there, and people who go up there for various things. So, as I said, with the phasing strategy, for some period of time, will still be surface, so you can kind of like get used to not parking on the surface lot. But when you get there and it's totally transformed, it starts to really make sense. And also too, what we showed there was pretty ambitious, right? So you may end up, the market here is just not strong enough to even contemplate anything like that for a long time. And so there have been some mall redevelopment strategies where they may just focus on just that kind of that main mixed use road that I showed, kind of went along the edge of up next to the mall. And maybe they just leave the rest open surface parking. So there's so many different ways you can skin that. Yes, sir.
So you mentioned the energy saving lights, like in a downtown street.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if you've actually seen that implemented somewhere. I didn't see the street inviting by having lights there, but still having that energy saving going on.
Yeah, so my recommendation is you don't turn them into energy saving mode until it's like when nobody's here. Unfortunately, right now, that's about 8 o'clock at night, right? We want to extend that time. We want to make it so that you only get in energy saving mode until like 11 or something. That means you're having more thriving downtown. But nonetheless, you wouldn't want to just regular. But I don't know specifically where it's been done. It's a good question. So we need to look into that. If you're trying to some far-fetched idea. Sir.
You mentioned it kind of briefly, but it wasn't really clear. What were your thoughts on like e-bike share, e-scooter share within the town on the bike trails?
Yes. So, when it comes to micro mobility, we're looking at all of those things now. I know in Nashville where we are, it's scooters have been met with mixed reviews. I think the big concern is they just sort of get left about, and sometimes people run into people, but sometimes it's just we got lots of tourists where it's a desirable place to go, and they maybe should check people's breathalyzer before they land on the scooters. Maybe that's our problem. I don't know, but nonetheless, it can be a challenge. But I think that a lot of places that it works really well, and it's like kind of what you do. So that kind of answers from the word. I mean, yes, it's something that would be part of a strategy. Yes, Christy.
I like it.
Hey. All right. Good. And on that note. Oh, by the way, the town had not seen any of this until you saw it. So, what did you think, Gary?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if anybody else has a question, let's use a microphone so everybody can hear, okay, especially online, but I was just gonna emphasize that there's a couple of things that I think folks watching at home or here might say, well, what about that? Like you said, like downtown and Broad Street. So we actually asked them not to focus on those because we've done so much work there. We're, you know, they're a priority right now, and we have people working there. We've talked about them, you know, for a decade basically or longer. So we asked them to kind of do other pieces, and what are, you know, let's not forget about the other places down that maybe we haven't focused quite as much on. What's kind of that's kind of why we do it. So I just want to mention that.
Always forget those little details and talk about that stuff. But one of the things you'll likely see in the plan is a recommendation for a cohesive and consolidated downtown master plan that actually brings forward all of that good thinking that's come, you know, over the years, because it seems like there's enthusiasm for it.
People did talk about it. People did talk a lot about those things, so I don't.
Yes.
Or that was a big topic of conversation, and that's just, I was saying why that wasn't. Science.
Does the innovation park include a makerspace?
It can, for sure, yeah, I mean, it's like, I think the thing about a makerspace is it's great because it allows people who may not have, you know, the equipment and the, you know, facilities and all that, sort of democratizes innovation. So I think that that'll be good. So Gene said, does the innovation part have a makerspace in it? So yeah.
So Trent, who was working on the market analysis, was also talking about maybe rather like makerspace is great, the micro manufacturing is kind of one and the same, but the micro manufacturing brings in the students from MCC and high school students, where if you're looking for a place to house some programs like that, co-ops or things, it could be in the office innovation part. If there's anyone online who would like to ask a question, please do so.
Yes, see.
We have a resource in town that hasn't been mentioned, I don't think. And it's a technical resource that should be very valuable. And that's the technical high school next to East Catholic. Is that? I was thinking of somehow the innovation park can fit together with that.
And so Gene said that we haven't talked about a technical high school. It seems like an asset in the community. So.
Yeah, I think that was what was mentioned when we were hearing about that program. I think that is associated with that school, but I wasn't sure what the name of the school was. But Cheney Tech. Yeah.
All right. Anything concerning? Anything anybody freaking out on the inside, but being too polite to say so?
It seems pretty ambitious, seeing how, you know, we're only going up a couple thousand people in population and the state across the board is going down. And it's not becoming any more affordable to live here. And as older we move out, our taxes are going up. I think about 15% increase in the next 3 years in town. So I can see how they're going to be pushing more like apartment style living, because home ownership is going to be less affordable, more attractive to younger people. But like you said, it looks like that's enough development for Manchester for like 100 years possibly. And as there's so many unknown variables as we go forward, like when John Ford was talking about here these projections, like I don't have much faith in whether like 3 or 4 days out, you know, let alone, and I don't think any projections that they claimed have actually come to fruition. So it doesn't give me much confidence, like, oh, we're going to be experiencing this or that. It looks, it's a very attractive presentation. I just like to see how the implementation is. I also feel like some of these things like marketplace would be able to determine that if maybe the government would step out of the way. It's like, no, we're going to, you know, the top-down plan.
Yeah.
It's not.
No, that's a good point.
Visualization.
I think, you know, when it comes to forecasting and predicting things like not just population, but also climate change, one of the things that's kind of interesting in the way that we approach it is the things that we've shown and the things that we would include in a plan start to open up possibilities rather than to dictate something that must happen or that must happen. The ideas of dealing with stormwater in a more sustainable way, for instance, has benefits, you know, with or without climate change. And so I think it's kind of neat, you know, that we're able to do things. We're at a point now in history, in the thinking, technology, the market preferences and all that, where these things all sort of coincide. And so, like, for instance, if we said the mall has to develop like that, it could be problematic, right? If the market's not there for it. And so what we want to do is make sure that, you know, nothing that is in the plan, that's what this is sort of more of a high level vision and plan. A lot of plans don't call out specific sites, you know, it's just, I think sometimes planners are afraid to do it because somebody doesn't like it or something like that. But we just feel like you, from what we showed, pull out, well, a lot of what you may be doing in the future is more multifamily for the reasons you said. And, you know, even if we are able to provide more multifamily, which ought to be at a lower price point, because these places are so cool, we actually have a real challenge of keeping them affordable, right? As soon as you make an amazing place, it's almost like, oh, this is expensive. So that's a challenge. But I think, you know, as we're looking at expanding those housing options, a lot of the smaller scale stuff that it's not as obvious in the plans as maybe we'll show you all, for instance, we'll start to free up those units that are more reasonable prices. As Tripp said in one of the presentations, you know, we really focus on the idea of attainable housing, say affordable housing. That means so many things to so many people. And we want to make things attainable to people at all price points throughout the town. So forecasting is hard. Yes, sir.
What would be the plan to implement one of the goal sites that I'd like to identify here? What would be a time frame to be seeing one of those sites actually being put into play?
Sure. So yes, what the time frame that would be for some of these ideas. So it depends. Like, for instance, the mall project that I just mentioned in Indiana, what they're trying to do is find a master developer to sort of oversee the whole thing and do it cohesively. But currently they don't have a master developer, and they have 3 different owners, and each of those owners is kind of has their own time frame. You know, I'm looking to do something now, or if I'm looking to do something here. Why are you drawing on my property? Those kind of things. So depending on the development strategy, things can happen sooner or later. When it comes to the Spencer Street corridor, that's one that you like to have a master developer be people over time. You do a little of this, a little of that. And so, you know, it really is incremental, as you probably would want it to be. Because at the end of the day, if something happened overnight, all done by one hand, all designed by one architect, it's going to feel like a development rather than a place, rather than the natural evolution growth of your town. And so I think, you know, you all are doing things already, just incentivize the growth that you do want, the change that you do want. And I think, you know, keeping those kind of strategies at the forefront will accelerate those things. But a lot of this is, you know, there's some parks, there's some streetscape improvements, there's some of those kind of things that are adjacent to private property. But nearly all of the big moves that we're showing in these are on private property, which means that the private market will decide, you know, when now to move this thing forward. Yeah, here.
I was just going to add to that. So a question that my office gets a lot is like, what does the town want to see here? I'm I'm a property owner and I'm thinking of developing or I'm thinking of buying this property. What's the town's vision? I'm like, well, I mean, I'm not the town, right? I can tell you what I think, but this type of concept really helps us with that. It says, well, here's some ideas that we've come up with in the past. Here's what this could look like someday. What do you think about it? And that kind of gets owners and developers thinking. So, and again, to Colin's point, most of this is going to be done by the private market, right? It's going to be done. The Buckland Hills right now is owned by several private entities, right? It's not something that the town is going to be able to say or wants to say. It should look like this, right? But it starts to get people thinking. It starts to get people imagining. When we met with the mall owner in the past, they're thinking similar things like this, because as Brian said, they've seen it in other places, right? And they're, whether it's them or whether it's somebody that comes after them, I think having this kind of information and starting to think about it and having the community think about it can only help us.
The way the plan will be used is, let's say the mall doesn't happen to have zoning right now that is conducive to creating what you just saw. And so the owner comes in and says, I have a plan. I want to rezone this to be mixed use and do all of these things. Now the town goes, okay, well, let's see what the conservation and development says about this. Oh, wow, it says we should do this. This is what we've all decided to do. And then we can make that zoning change, knowing that supports it. So it's not even so much about inspiring the owner, hopefully it does, but it's more about as you all move forward.
I really like the water retention element. I mean, I have swales in my house, culture, and I think like the regreening in town would be a benefit. You talked briefly about like maybe promoting or making recommendations to have more local agriculture. That's good. But one thing about conservation of the energy usage, I was wondering, are you guys going to have any sort of recommendation for like how people say heat their houses in the future, whether it's like voting mini splits or heat pumps, or trying to limit the use of like wood burners or other alternative methods of.
Yeah, I mean, for a comprehensive plan, it's a pretty fine grained recommendation. So usually what you would find would be ideas like that would be contained in sort of a higher level recommendation. And so, that's, we have to, as we go through the process and start looking at, what we're trying to accomplish, what we've heard from all of you, then we sort of figure out, well, how deep do we go? So I don't know yet is the answer, but it sounded pretty fun.
When you were talking about Depot Square, I'm wondering if you've had any discussions about the role of the White Branch Library in those conversations. Right now, it's a really important community asset in the northern town, especially for the walking population. So I'm just wondering if that's come up at all.
So we haven't talked with the library, but in talking with people at the Planapalooza, you'll see in the plan, and we'll post it on the website, that it's hard to get into all the different kind of granularities, and I sat here just feeling, what about that? But the library is a good one to bring out, because I was told by many people that it's really well loved and it's a good place, and I wanted to make a great place, kind of with the plaza around it and keeping the library exactly where it was. The community center next to it, I heard, isn't in that great of shape, and you're getting a community center across the street, so that's actually where the plaza would be. And then the library would actually anchor that. So that's the answer to the library. And then I did put in a trailhead just right down the trail from that that has parking, and the Opera House is still there, and a plaza around that. So just kind of linking your existing assets was one of the elements. I'm glad you brought the library.
Yes.
I'd like to make a comment. In one of your opening statements, you mentioned what was said is most important to Manchester was open spaces, maintaining open spaces, and having walkable neighborhoods. And I think you kind of met that.
Thanks.
I do love the indoor track. And yes, indoor track and outdoor track people are the same people. It's in the Northeast, it's just the weather that determines. But the idea with the trail from the Innovation Park, when my daughter did live in town and when she does come to visit, she likes to run on that trail and it is a little sketchy looking. I mean, you're just parking like with these buildings around you. So I can picture someone like her and her friends really finding that to be a very attractive out, to go for a run. And, there's a place that they can stop and rest or get water and something to eat. That was really a cool way to envision that.
And right on the edge of the image, there was a building, be residential too, so you actually bring, so just like right now, 5 o'clock or whatever time, kind of shuts down and people leave, but if you have people living right in there, it kind of keeps that sort of safety going. I don't know, what time does the axe throw in places like this, it's built off the energy of the axe throw. All right. This has been great. We have really enjoyed getting to know all of you. We've been enjoying getting to get to know the town, eating your food and learning about all these amazing assets that you have here. I hope that you feel like you've been listening while we're here and will continue to do so. And then most importantly, I hope that when we come back to sort of release the public draft of the plan, that the room is going to be full. But you're going to go and you're going to tell everybody, like, they're planning the future of the town. Like, we told them all of these things, but we want to hear from you too. And so just can't encourage you enough. I'm always I'm getting more amused by the fact that we're sitting here with this small group of people talking about 100-year plan for your town. And you would think that, everyone would be here. Now, maybe they've all heard, hey, there's this great team of people here. They've got it under control. Don't worry about it. Just stay home. But, at the end of the day, we really do count on the community to help keep us on track, help hold us accountable, to make sure we don't goof anything up. So stay with us on this journey to go from